Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for stopping by. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Cami Ewald. I am the creator of AlottleTumblerTutorials. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about epoxy resin, the safety concerns, and also some ways to keep yourself safe while you're using epoxy. Because I don't want to scare anybody or deter them from using epoxy, because I truly feel like it can be safe if handled properly and if we're smart about it. I think that it's our own responsibility to protect ourselves and be educated. I really feel that knowledge is power. That's what I'm hoping to do here today, is just to share some of the knowledge that I've come to know. When I got going in tumbler making, I read so many comments on the Tumbler groups about how epoxy was dangerous and it could kill you and you should stay away from it. I too was very nervous and almost went with an epoxy alternative, but read some not so great things about that as well. And I really wanted to make a good quality product that I could be proud of and that would last a long time. So that's why I went with epoxy. I didn't have great habits from the start, I will be totally honest. I definitely kind of took for granted that, oh, I'm fine. I definitely have come to learn the error of my ways. And even through doing the research for this video, I have learned a lot of things and want to change some of the habits I still have. So if that's something you're interested in, let's get into it. So what is epoxy? Epoxy is the end result of two parts. Part A, which is your epoxy resin, and part B, which is your hardener, sometimes called a catalyst or a curing agent. So epoxy is the chemical reaction of those two, which creates the end result of your epoxy that we use on our tumblers. And actually epoxy is really kind of everywhere. It's in electrical components and coatings. It's used to manufacture paintbrushes. It's used as adhesive in structural building. It's kind of everywhere. Epoxy is technically a chemical, so chemicals also are all around us. I mean, really, we have chemical reactions in our body, in our cooking, everywhere. Salt is a chemical, water is a chemical. Not to downplay the potential risks of epoxy, because seriously, we need to take it serious, you guys. Our health is important, and you alone are responsible for that. I don't know about you guys, but when I think of chemical reaction, it kind of takes me back to Bill Nye the Science Guy. Hashtag 8th grade science. So by definition, a chemical reaction is just two or more parts reacting together to create another substance. I just really wanted to put the word chemical in context, because it is kind of a scary word sometimes. I think one of the more serious or dangerous spots of epoxy is when it's in its uncured state. So when your epoxy resin, your hardeners, and then the dilutants and other things that they add to it to help that catalyst happen, they are pretty serious irritants and also can be super sensitizing, to your skin and your insides. Although part A can still cause quite a bit of irritation, part B, the hardener, is actually responsible for more of your severe chemical burns and things like that. So obviously the opposite of uncured is cured, and that's when epoxy is said to be the safest. So from what I understand, most, if not all, epoxies will cure 90% in their first 3 to 5 days from when you lay that epoxy, obviously depending on heat and humidity, all those things. So the other 10% will happen over the course of 30 days from when you lay that epoxy. So we're talking about that it's dangerous. Well, what kind of dangers? Epoxy is known to cause contact dermatitis and other allergic reactions. It can also be very, very harmful if you're inhaling the fumes or like the vapors that come from your epoxy as it's curing, or the sanding dust, like when you're sanding in between coats. Like it seems hard, so you might think it's cured, but it's not completely. And if you're inhaling that uncured epoxy dust, it is causing havoc in your lungs, trust me. There is another YouTuber that I've reached out to that did a really powerful video about something like this. And I'm waiting for her to email me back. And if she does, I'm going to put a link to her video in the comments. It's actually a really, really real and raw look into what can happen if you're not careful. So we do want to be extra cautious and take it responsibly and give it the respect it deserves. Our chances of potentially developing like your contact dermatitis, your allergic reactions, all the stuff with breathing and upper respiratory things and things like that from inhaling the fumes and the epoxy dust only increase the more we're exposed to it. The more that we get uncured epoxy on our skin, if we are working in a room that doesn't have good ventilation or is like really small and enclosed, it's going to increase the concentration of those vapors and those fumes and make it almost like double, or I don't know, more anyway, than what it would be if we were operating in like a really open area or good ventilation that can disperse those fumes and cause them not to just be like right here and we're just sucking in all those fumes. So how do we protect ourselves? Glad you asked. I think it's important to say that if you're just getting started, try to make yourself develop good habits now, because like it's super hard to break them later on. Ask me how I know. So you want to develop some really good habits, both in terms of your epoxy process and your workspace and the way that you take care of yourself, like almost setting up some systems, because trust me, it is a bear to try to break those bad habits later. Even in doing the research for this video, like there's some things that I figured out that I really already need to change. And I've been doing epoxy for a little while now. It's important to establish those good habits early. Probably one of the first things I wanted to bring up was to make sure whatever epoxy you're using is FDA compliant and food safe. Because like people are putting their mouths on this stuff, even after it's cured. You know, you don't want to take any chances. We don't want to make anybody sick. And you want to definitely make sure you read the safety recommendations for whatever particular epoxy that you're using. There are so many different epoxies, like there's no way I could have researched all of them. So I definitely strongly encourage you to make sure that you're reading up on whatever epoxy you're choosing to use. So some of the things that are probably no-brainers, but I'll bring them up anyway. We want to make sure that we have things nearby like paper towels, or some people use baby wipes. Some people just have like shop towels and just quickly grab some acetone or alcohol or something like that to clean up any spills really quickly. And you want to make sure that you really use something that's like alcohol, like that 91% alcohol, that's really going to get all that residue off whatever you've spilled it on, like your table or something. If you've spilled it on your table and then you think you've cleaned it up well enough and you're sitting there doing some artwork later on or something like that and your arm is laying in it and there's a little bit of residue left over, guess what? It's like super concentrated right on your skin. So you want to make sure that you take the time to clean up any spills, any accidents right away. Something else that seems like kind of a no-brainer, but honestly, I was doing it quite a bit and I used to be a nail tech, so some of this stuff totally should have transferred over in terms of knowledge, and for whatever reason, I took it for granted, is not eating and drinking in the area that you're doing your epoxy. Like, don't have any open soda cans or anything like that, because again, those fumes are circulating around in the air and coming into contact with whatever you're drinking. Even if you have a closed bottle, like, you might have thought that you got it wiped off well enough in between cups. You go to turn the cap on your water bottle and you're transferring sometimes that epoxy chemical to the very thing you're trying to put in your mouth. Not so smart. Take it from me, not so smart. One of the other things that transferred over from being a nail tech is making sure that we label our bottles properly. So labeling acetone versus like your alcohol. Also your part A, your part B, if you're using regular epoxy and fast set for different layers, you want to make sure you clearly label those. It just helps to keep everything separated, and at a glance you can see what you're trying to grab and you don't have any oopses when you're trying to last coat on a project or something like that. Or you have paint and you're only trying to take a tiny little bit off the top layer and you accidentally dab into acetone, and guess what? Now you're starting all over again. Asking for a friend. So we are definitely wanting to like make sure our hair is up. Like, I have super long hair down to my fanny, and you know, if I don't have it up, or even sometimes when I like come in from outside or something like that and just have it in a side braid or something, more than once it has dipped into the epoxy when I'm trying to spread it on a cup, and one, I'm messing up my cup, and two, I'm getting epoxy in my hair. And if you don't notice until it's cured, you're cutting it out. You're not wiping it out. So we definitely want to make sure that our hair is up. Also, so that, you know, while you're working and doing things and things like that, your hair's not knocking things over and potentially spilling chemicals and other things onto your project or your workstation or anything like that. So definitely putting our hair up. On that same note of like knocking things over and things like that, something that I have really struggled with is keeping my workstation clear of clutter as much as possible. I don't know about y'all, but like as a crafter, I have found that I am a super messy crafter. Like, I'll get done with a few projects in the day and look down and it looks like not only did a glitter bomb go off in my shop, but like I don't put anything away in between the things that I'm doing. So it's all laid out on my station too, and hoofda, it's a mess. So as I'm looking for things or as I'm trying to reach for something, more than once have I knocked things over and made a mess or what have you. So I just wanted to throw out there, because it's something that I'm really going to work on, is trying to make my station a little less cluttered and more operator friendly, because it really does help when things are put where they're supposed to be. My grandma used to always say, a place for everything and everything in its place. She's so right, as always. I know I've already covered some other things and I kind of touched on this already, but I think probably one of the biggest things that's an area of like a gray area for people sometimes is working in a well-ventilated area, okay? My epoxy says that it does not have any VOCs, and VOC stands for volatile organic compound. So when you're smelling any chemicals coming off of your epoxy, that's what you're smelling, is those volatile organic compounds. Those are the things that can potentially make you sick. So if you're working in a room and we have our epoxy, which some epoxies do have VOCs, we have acetone, alcohol, you name it. I mean, all of these things build up and can become pretty good and concentrated in the air that we're breathing if we're not working in a very well ventilated area. So if you are working and it just seems like, oh my gosh, it's so stinky in here, stop what you're doing, open a window, or exit the room. It really is that important, you guys. If you are having headaches or feeling dizzy or anything like that, oh my gosh, stop. Because that's your body's way of telling you, help, I need help, something's wrong. So definitely make sure that you're working either in a really big open space. I've heard people working in their garages and things like that. We live in Western Montana, so we don't have warm weather here very often, so that just definitely wouldn't have worked for us. But making sure that you can, like they have kits that you can ventilate the fumes out of your room and have some return clean air coming into your room. Definitely look into options if all you have available is a small space. Don't just take it for granted that you're going to be safe because, oh, I haven't had any headaches yet. Remember, the more that we're exposed to epoxy, both in the liquid form and the fume form, the more concentrated that is and the more it builds up in your system. So you want to take it seriously and make sure that you're creating these good habits from the beginning, or if you're already into epoxy cups and stuff like that, do your best to try to change some of those bad habits. I speak from experience because, like I said, I'm going to be working on some of this stuff too. On top of making sure that you've got good airflow and that you're like pushing the fumes out, fresh quality air in, you want to make sure that when working with epoxy, that you are using a respirator. So this is a half mask respirator and it has the filters on the side. You want to have something that is called an organic vapor respirator. It's really important because not all respirators are created the same. An organic vapor respirator has a two-part system. One is your particulate filter that will help filter out like the dust and particles and stuff like that so you're not inhaling those into your lungs. The second part has a charcoal filled component to it that helps to create a barrier so that you're not inhaling those fumes. So again, an organic vapor respirator is what you are looking for. This is a half one, but they also have like full face mask ones to where it'll come all the way up your head so it'll protect your eyes as well. If you're not using something like that, you might think about getting protective eyewear, goggles, something like that to protect your eyes from both the dust and also, again, those vapors can also seep in through any membrane tissue, your eyes, your nose, your mouth. Anywhere that it's wet is going to potentially draw in those vapors and cause you to become overexposed. While we're on the vapor respirator, another thing I wanted to note is that it's really important to set yourself up on a schedule for changing out these filters. It's not a like set it and forget it kind of thing because they do become clogged over time, and it depends on how much you use it. You know, are you working in it all day, full day, every day? You're probably going to need to change it more often than the occasional hobbyist that does maybe 1 cup a week or something like that. So look into it for whatever respirator that you're investing in. And it is an investment, guys. It's an investment into your health. So try to think of it like that. Some of them can get pretty spendy, but it's definitely necessary so that you're not breathing in all those VOCs and potentially causing an allergic reaction or some havoc and damage in your lungs. So organic respirator, get you some. Like I said, the epoxy that I use says that it has no VOCs, and I haven't had any detectable smell at all, but I am going to start using the respirator. Like I said, I'm changing some of my habits. No bad comments, please. I am seeing the error of my ways, okay? So anyway, while it says it has no VOCs, in doing the research for this video, my heart was convicted that why take a chance, you know? I've already got it. I might as well use it. Duh. I definitely want to make sure kind of that better be safe than sorry, because some of these damages from breathing this stuff in and getting it on our skin and things like that are irreversible. They're permanent. Like there's no going back from that. So I definitely, myself, I want to take it serious. So I would encourage you to do so as well. So moving on down, we're wearing clothes that we don't really care if we get stuff on them. They're rag clothes, if you will. Things that might be helpful for some people. Some people might want to wear long sleeves if you're concerned that you might drip or rub into something or things like that, because it is not if you get epoxy on it, it's when. Inevitably, you're gonna have a little drip, even if you don't notice it right away, and darn it, there goes a good shirt. Believe me, that's how a lot of my epoxy clothes have come to be. I have a whole set of shirts and pants that are completely devoted to just epoxy work. So I will put them on before I come into my cup room. And then when I'm done in my cup room, I take them off, and I have a basket that are just for my epoxy clothes. And when I get enough in there, then they go in the wash machine. And I'm not gonna say I never have worn a shirt 2 days in a row, but almost never, because I want to make sure that I'm definitely washing it in between times of use so that I'm not overexposing my skin to fumes that have gotten into my clothes and the fibers of your clothes, or even the dust of epoxy gets into your clothes and just sits against your skin. But I make sure that I take them off as soon as I go upstairs from my cup room, because I don't want to like sit on my couch where I will be sitting again and potentially like sitting in epoxy dust over and over and over again, or like my husband, my dogs, or my grandson potentially. You know, I just don't want to take that kind of risk. So I take my epoxy clothes off and put them in the basket as soon as I go upstairs. Again, this is to lessen that chance of overexposure and just keep yourself protected. Alrighty, moving on down. Let's talk gloves. So when I first got into epoxy, I, of course, like a lot of people, read up on what I needed to get into it, what supplies I needed, and everywhere said nitrile gloves, nitrile gloves, nitrile gloves. And I was like, why not vinyl gloves? Why not rubber gloves? Why not neoprene gloves? There's so many different kind of gloves that I wanted to know the answer. Like I said, I'm kind of a curious George of sorts. And so I did some digging. The reason for nitrile gloves over like latex gloves. So nitrile gloves are more chemically resistant. This in part is because they have smaller pores in your nitrile gloves than latex gloves do. And so it creates a better barrier between your hand and whatever is on the outside. So it stops your chemicals from absorbing through your gloves, but it also stops the oils from your hands from going through the gloves and transferring onto your cups. Can we say fish eyes, anyone? Learn the hard way. Nitrile gloves are also thicker, and so they're less prone to be able to be punctured. If you get them hung up on something, they have a lot more give than your nitrile gloves, which will just rip as soon as you puncture them. So I will leave links for all of the things that I'm talking about in the description, but I have found lately that the best place to get nitrile gloves, at least in our area, we live in super small town Montana. We don't have a lot of options. Truly, like our Michael's is, I think, 59 miles away or something like that. We don't have a craft store super close near us or anything like that. We don't have a Walmart. We are country bumpkins. So we go to the big town. We go to the city probably about once a month, really. The Costco nitrile gloves are fairly inexpensive and they're really, really good quality. So we want to make sure that we're putting on our gloves even before you reach for your bottles that you keep your epoxy and your hardener, your epoxy resin and your hardener in, because no matter how careful I am, I always wind up getting some residue on the outside. Like, I clean it, but it seems to always be there. So don't take any chances. Just put your gloves on before you reach for your bottles. So I don't know if anybody else knows how to properly take off gloves to prevent contamination, like what you would see in a doctor's office or in a hospital or something like that. So if you're putting your gloves on, okay, I'll put 2 on just so you can see what I'm doing here. So we've got our gloves on, right? So some people will just like pull from the fingers or like reach in and grab to pull them off like that. Okay, what that's doing is you're potentially creating a situation where you're going to get epoxy on your skin, because the reason we have gloves is because we have epoxy on our hands. So you want to make sure that you're taking right here at the wrist and pulling from right here. So see, I've got a little bit down here, so I'm not even close to touching my skin. So I'm taking that off, right? Taking that off. And then same thing on the other side. So I'm still holding it with that. Same thing on this other side. I'm taking it with my clean hand and pulling it off and kind of putting it inside of itself. And then I'm putting it in the garbage. So I don't know if anybody cares to know that, but I just thought I'd throw it in just in case. So what do we do if we get uncured or liquid state epoxy on our bare skin? They say the best thing to do is just stop what you're doing immediately, go and wash with plenty of soap and water. Like, you're lathering it on and rinsing it for quite some time. You're gonna flush your skin. I use Dawn dish soap. It's got the stuff that really helps to cut through grease and oil and all that stuff, and I have found that it does really, really well to cut through epoxy if I get any on my skin. Technically, you can use like acetone or alcohol. Both of those are really good at like cutting epoxy as well, but they also can become irritants to your skin, and it's a chemical. It dries out your skin. So definitely use that sparingly, or if you can help it, not at all. So if you get epoxy on your clothes, you want to make sure that you are taking a moment to take your clothes off. That way it's not just sitting there and holding that epoxy in one spot, basically just bubbling against your skin. You want to take your clothes, shirt, pants, whatever it dripped on, off. You want to make sure that you take soap and water and wash that area really well that has been dripped on. Even if you think it didn't soak through your clothes, don't take any chances. Take the time to really wash it off so that you know you're protected. I've never heard of anybody having this happen to them before, but it did come up in my research. Like, what if we wind up getting uncured epoxy in our eye? So the research said that you want to make sure that you flush your eye for 15 minutes with low pressure water. So you're really just flushing that eye under the sink, or like your spray hose from your sink or something like that. Just really making sure to get as much water to wash that off, and blinking as you're doing it. So you're trying to get that off your eyeball, and your eyelid will help to move it to the side so you can wipe it out. If after that 15 minutes, if you find that your eye is still really irritated, definitely seek some medical attention. And again, I've never heard of this happening to anybody, but I did come across it when I was doing research, so I wanted to bring it up. If you accidentally swallow some epoxy, you're going to want to rinse your mouth out really, really well. You're not inducing vomiting. Like, don't make yourself puke. You want to make sure you rinse your mouth really, really well. Get to a doctor right away. Kind of a side note in here in this area is that you want to also take the time to have your epoxy, it's called an MSDS sheet, a material safety data sheet. Sorry, I had a brain lapse for a minute. A material safety data sheet. What this is it has the entire chemical breakdown. It has all of the risks and proper precautions that you should be taking while using the product. Technically, every product that you use has one. So you can usually find this on the website of your epoxy company. You can go in, you can download it and just print it off. If you can't find it, contact your company and they can send you one either by email or in the mail. Why this is important is if you have it already printed off. So I have it in a sheet protector here. So I have part A MSDS sheets on one side, and then I have part B MSDS sheets on the other side. I have them both in the same sheet protector, so they're just together. So if you have to go to the hospital because you have accidentally gotten some inside by swallowing in your eye, something like that, or if you're having an allergic reaction of some kind, this is going to be very helpful for your medical professionals. They're going to be able to cut to the chase, know exactly what they're dealing with, and can properly treat you probably faster and better than if they're playing a guessing game of what chemicals are in whatever epoxy you're using. Or if you tell them I'm using such and such epoxy and they have to go research it and find out what's in it. So if you have this in a spot where you always know where it is, you can just grab and go and head to the hospital, you will do yourself and your medical professionals a whole lot of good. So as I talked about earlier, we want to make sure that we start out with good habits. I, for one, did not. And it's a booger to try to correct those, seriously. Ugh. So, like along the lines of having a not cluttered area for fear of knocking stuff over, like take the time, or I am trying to, I should say, take the time every day that I'm working down here to, at the end of my session, wipe it up. Not only are you wiping up glitter, you're also wiping up potential epoxy spills or any epoxy dust that might have settled onto your station or wherever you're working. So that way, the next day you're just starting with a clean start. Along with wiping down your station, you want to make sure that you take your garbage out often, because I don't know about you guys, but I use paper towels with alcohol and acetone and all kinds of stuff. So what do we do with it? We throw it in the garbage and then it just sits there, stinking up the place. Yeah, eventually, it dries and dissipates and then you might not be able to smell it so bad, but why take the risk, Get yourself a little garbage can so you're not tempted to fill it up and leave it until it's full. Guilty. And take it out when you're on your way out of your room or whatever situation that you have. That way it's just, again, you have a clean, fresh start the next day. You're not walking into somewhere that's already overwhelmed with smells or whatever. Before I take my garbage out, oftentimes I will sweep, not always mop, but I definitely try to sweep really, really well and mop every couple of days. What that's going to do is, one, make it look nicer, and who doesn't like to be in a nice, clean craft room, right? But also, it helps to cut down on your glitter relocating in places that you might not want it to be. Like, that man cup you've been working on and trying so hard to keep the glitter off, and final coat, you find one speck of glitter on it. Ugh, so frustrating. But also you're not kicking up any dust, epoxy dust or glitter or anything like that, and causing that to become airborne. And maybe you think you're safe because you're not working with liquid epoxy, like stirring it or anything like that. But guess what? You just kicked up dust and you inhaled it if you don't have your mask on. So it just helps to keep things nice and tidy and clean. But sincerely, guys, I truly believe that epoxy, just like many other chemicals, can be safe and are actually, I don't want to say beneficial, but obviously for what we do, they're necessary. But I truly believe that epoxy can be safe if handled correctly and if we take the proper precautions. Again, you want to make sure that you're protecting your airways by a respirator, your skin by protective gloves, clothes, things like that, your eyes with eyewear if you need to. You want to make sure that you're limiting your exposure to the fumes as much as humanly possible. Fumes out, fresh air in, as as often as you can. Open a window, whatever it takes, you know. Keep yourselves healthy. I think that we need to love ourselves enough and love our family and our pets and our children and things like that. I don't know why I said pets in front of children because my kids are grown maybe and my pets are still at home. But definitely our children and our pets, we want to make sure that we are keeping ourselves safe so that we can stay around and enjoy them. And we are also keeping them safe, so we're not exposing them unnecessarily to anything that could harm them. So do you guys have any other tips or tricks that you want to add in? Anything that I might have missed, or anything that you think that I need to be corrected on, or anything like that? Please, please, please leave them in the comments. I want to learn, and I would love to have this be such a huge informational part for other people to learn as well. So if you have any tips or tricks or suggestions, please leave them in the comments. And if you found value in this video, would you guys do me a favor and like and subscribe and leave any comments down below? It will help my channel grow, and I have some really fun stuff coming up I'm super excited to share with you guys. That is it for me for now, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, guys. Bye.